Hello, my fellow readers. This is I, Dark Symphony 777. I'm back. Yes, I'm back with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story and any future fanfiction you want me to read or review. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, story I got for you is... I actually completely forgot the name of the author. Oh, there it is. Subvania by Lania Inverse. It is a Castlevania Subnautica crossover. And I actually wanted to do this video during my little Castlevania week, but I ran out of time to actually properly be able to read it. So this is kind of a bonus one for that. So yes, Castlevania, my favorite video game franchise of all time, and Subnautica, the thalassophobia simulator. Okay. So this is kind of a weird story. Not so much the content, but more the general direction of how the story went. I was expecting one thing, I got completely another thing. It's kind of weird. So let's start with the plot. So the plot follows this girl named Anna Torres, who is technically supposed to represent the Subnautica protagonist. You know, that's kind of fair. And her cousin Trevor Belmont. And we're not even doing the game version; we're doing the anime version. And her best friend, Sypha Belnades, they crash land onto the planet of Subnautica. I'm just gonna call it Waterworld because I am not gonna keep repeating the actual name of the planet all the time throughout this video. It's gonna be awkward. And then they just those three kind of do like a shortened version of the Subnautica storyline. Where they crash out on the planet, they get infected, they have to fix the Aurora. They go deep down, they find the Sea Dragon Leviathan. They have to help the Sea Dragon Leviathan hatch its kids to get rid of this stuff called the Kron, or Kra. I can't remember if it has an N or not at the end of it. I can't remember lots of stuff. Along the way, they find Adrian Tepesh. Okay. Deep down in like a certain sequestered off part. Because guess what? He had a mutation of the Kron that basically made him a vampire, made him photosensitive, extremely photosensitive. He couldn't even stay outside in the moonlight. And that's basically the entire story. That's the plot kind of summed up as simplest I can. Oh, the last couple of chapters introduced when they leave and they have to try and get to know each other. And it's like a completely different story. Don't worry, don't worry, there's a point to what I said there. So what do I think of the plot? I think honestly the plot had something going for it. With basically it's kind of a pseudo novelization of Subnautica. I'm like, Subnautica is like one of those games you can easily make a novelization about. I think it's one of the easier ones. Again, I still think it's going to be hard as balls, but it's like compared to something like Resident Evil or, God forbid, someone does a novelization of Dark Souls. That would be crazy. Subnautica wouldn't be that hard. It'd just be, one guy talking to himself, building rafts, dealing with the Reaper Leviathan, meeting a crasher, the crasher goes, hello, and it blows up in his face. That'd actually be kind of funny if, like, he's looking around, and he turns around, there's the fish with the one eye, and he's like the creepy smile right in front, and he goes, hello, and it blows up in his face. Ah! That'd be kind of funny. I do think the plot had legs, but I think this was very much a situation where the author was very, very ambitious and kind of overestimated her abilities realized the story was going to be way harder than she thought and kind of simplified it. That's the general feeling I got from the story. Like, okay, you have an actual plot of Subnautica, but it doesn't really show all the details. All the parts are basically just long discussions, part to part, which makes sense. It is a sci-fi drama, but it's very weak in both genres because we don't really see that much of a sci-fi part. We don't really see much of a drama because drama is supposed to be very character driven. And oh boy, the characters. Yeah. Facepalm. Honestly, yeah, I'm being sarcastic with that. Characters? What characters? We only have 4 characters, and 2 characters are completely shoved to the back. How is that possible? I don't know. So let's go. Let's talk about the characters. First off, we have Trevor. He's nothing. He's a klutz, kind of, who likes to get hurt. He's an idiot, and there's nothing more to that. He rarely talks. And he's shoved to the background as soon as Adrian shows up. Okay, fine. Sypha. She's even worse than Trevor. At least Trevor had something. Sypha's just there. And then she's shoved to the back when Adrian shows up. Adrian, let's talk about Adrian. At least Adrian and Anna have something. Adrian is basically a rich CEO. His story was him and the Degassi, I think it's the Degassi. Yeah, the Degassi, they're traveling, they crash land, and they try to survive. It was him, another doctor, and this guy named Scott. I can't remember his actual name. It's been so long since I actually I finished the story, and I've been trying to review it for a long time, but I've always been working. So these 3, they're like living, and then they all find out they are infected with the Kron. Adrian has a mutation where he suffers from photosensitivity. They start going into the water and they go very deep, but then Scott kind of goes mad, tries to kill Adrian because Adrian is now too weak because he overexerted himself, and the Kron is advanced to a point where he's kind of comatose. He tries to kill Adrian a couple times. The doctor, deals with him and runs with Adrian to build another base, and the doctor passes away. And so does Scott. But Adrian's still alive, and he's been alive for like 10 years, deep underwater, going insane. Like, when he first meets the crew, he's like, "Are you real?" He goes, yes, we're real. I don't believe you. But we are real. Prove it. Okay, I believe you're real, but I don't believe they're real. It's kind of a quirky. Adrian has something going for him. Sure, it's bare bones. Like, we don't really get any character development until the last 2-3 chapters. Think about that. We don't get any character development on these 3 characters until the last couple of chapters. And then there's Anna. I mentioned Anna. Anna is the main character. She's supposed to be the Subnautica protagonist, and she's plain Jane. Like, she's supposed to be just there. But at least she has a purpose where she's the doctor. She's trying to help everyone out. She's like very kind of generous. And she's still like, still doesn't really have anything. No! She actually gets character development on the last chapter. I don't see how that is physically possible. How you could shun 2 characters, one character shows up, and then keep the other 2 characters kind of bland until the very end where you actually start the development. Well, granted, there is one plot element that kind of involves that, but they don't advance. They don't change over the course of the story. They stay static at the beginning. They stay static at the end. Well, not sort of. They kind of develop at the end, but then it's just it's really a mess character-wise. I do think the story at least had something going for it, because I kind of get what the author was going for with the pseudo-novelization. Again, I think it's pretty much... Hold on a second. Where was I? Oh yeah, again, I get what the author was going for with the pseudo-novelization, and you were trying to kind of focus more on the characters and their dynamic, but it didn't work because you didn't really develop the characters enough, and they kind of came off as flat. Adrian really didn't do any favors, because the moment Adrian's introduced, you focus more or less exclusively on Anna and Adrian, and Trevor and Seinfeld was more just brought out of focus and only really showed up for a few parts just to talk with Anna and try and develop her nonsensical character. It was very, very awkward character-wise. It was like very, very bad. That's, if I had to say what I think is the worst problem, it'd be the characters. Grammar's fine. It does go into like the more medical thing, stuff like that. So I think from a medical standpoint, it's kind of okay. Pacing, I actually think the pacing is pretty good, actually. Pacing and the writing, I do think the whole, like, it's the pacing and the writing where I honestly figured out that the author kind of overextended herself and tried to make a story that she simply was not prepared for, that she was not experienced enough to write. Because I do honestly think that based on what was going on, you were trying to do a sort of, novelization, and you were trying to have all this stuff interact and coalesce and everything. And I think it really read like you were trying to do that, but every time when you tried, you kind of cut away and you kind of skipped to the next part. It kind of broke up the flow. But at the same time, the bridging attempts by just making it conversation after conversation of like time skips and stuff like that, I think it was a band-aid, but I don't think it was a cure-all. But I do think with what I read was decent enough that I can't really complain about it, because I simply think it was passable. It wasn't bad, but I didn't think it was good. That being said, I do think there is actual promise in the story, like genuine promise in this story, but it cannot be a crossover. I'm sorry, I have to say this before I get into the second half. This is probably one of the weakest crossovers I've ever seen. What I think a crossover should be is you combine elements from both stories. Just simply having a character there doesn't really make it a crossover. You have to somehow blend the elements somehow, some way. And just having a character with no defining characteristics that you can easily just swap out with like someone else, that does not make a crossover. Like, I read plenty of crossovers on this channel, like Fallout Equestria Pink Eyes. That perfectly combined Fallout and My Little Pony. It blended it perfectly with the dystopian world, with the cutesy thing with puppy. Oh, excuse me. The cutesy thing with puppy smiles. It was blended very well. Again, with Turnabout Storm, it blended My Little Pony and Ace Attorney wonderfully together. With Fusion of Destinies 1 and 2, it perfectly blended the worlds of Harry Potter and Metroid together in a way that made sense and strengthened the story around it. This doesn't really scream like a Subnautica Castlevania crossover. It just comes off as just a Subnautica story. Like, that's really what it comes off as. And that really kind of a shame, because I do think, because there is one plot line that was actually really well done that I do want to talk about. And that is my favorite part of the whole story, and that is the mystery of the submerged sea moth. So early in the story, Anna Anna is cruising along, looking for supplies, stuff like that. Where she comes along this derelict sea moth. Sea moth is like this little glass bubble ship that you use to move around in the deeper parts of the ocean. And it's crumbling and kind of decrepit. It's falling apart. And when she gets near it, she gets a message from detailing what's happened with Adrian when he was comatose and everything that's been happening. And I thought, what? That's actually really well done. It actually blended the elements of Subnautica and Castlevania together. Granted, it wasn't more of a sci-fi, it was actually more of a horror way, because I kid you not, as the story progressed, every time when she went in the water, the derelict sea moth actually started to follow her. And it actually built up genuine suspense, wondering, how are you going to actually... what's going on with this thing? Because at first, she thought it was just a figment of her imagination. Like, it just appeared on the edge of her speed. Like, it'd be there and gone. And over. And every time when she thought she saw it, she got another message kind of detailing more information. I honestly thought that plot line, that direction, what the author was doing with the sea moth was phenomenal. I thought that was amazing. It's like, oh my god, I found something so good and something so bland. And it built up suspense when the sea moth started affecting the environment. Like when it showed up at Jilly Base, a stalagmite fell and actually destroyed parts of it. I thought, okay, now it's actually interacting, and now she's getting paranoid, she's getting scared. We're actually getting some character development from Anna. Sure, it's her being scared, but it's something. And then it starts summoning ghost leviathans out of nowhere to chase them. And then it's like, oh, can this get any better? Then as they're her, Trevor, Sypha, and her and Agent are traveling across the Lost River, it shows up right in front of them. And then summons a bunch of ghost leviathans to destroy it, to try and kill them. And now Adrian's freaking out, saying, oh my god, don't tell me that wasn't real. It said it was real. So I thought it was a figment of imagination. I was like, oh no! And I'm like, holy shit, this is actually really good! And I was like, and then it ends so horribly. They're actually entering the lava zone. They see the sea moth one more time. This time the whole group sees it. It summons a bunch of ghost leviathan to try and kill them. They run, and then they don't deal with it ever again. I'm like, oh my god, no! Why did it have to end like that? We don't know what the sea... The sea is such a good story element. Just dropped. It was just a kick in the dick. It really was. I thought that was literally one of the stupidest things ever. How that plot line just dropped. I'm like, you're not gonna finish it? How cool would it be if the thing just somehow shows up in space? Or better yet, at the end, they're like doing excavation stuff to grab everything to sell, because at the end of Subnautica, the Alteria Corp actually tells you, said, oh, this planet is owned by us, and anything you used, you now owe us some money, over $1 trillion. And so they start taking everything, they grab the derelict. That would have been cool, because that would have opened up the space for a sequel, but also leave suspense of, okay, what this thing gonna do now? And it was such a frightening thing of the mystery of, is it real, is it not, like, what's going on with this? Also the fact that thing kind of sort of acted as an exposition fairy, because every time it showed up, it kind of revealed a little bit more about the situation with Scott and the Doctor and Adrian. It kind of slowly, detailed what happened with them. I thought that was really cool. That whole plot element was extremely well done, and I think it this story would have been much better if it was horror. Like, instead of sci-fi drama, it was sci-fi horror. Or at least drama horror. So, would I recommend this story? No. I can't. It's too... Not enough happens to really warrant me recommending it. I think it was just... Outside of the sea moss, there's just nothing going substantially for it. Not, especially since this is a crossover. I mean, Castlevania is a 30-plus years franchise. And Castlevania actually has a history of introducing aquatic enemies. Like, okay, an entire planet full of water. Castlevania has water enemies like mermen, like Decabras, like, not brewers, Raha, Rusaka, Edemus, sea needles. I mean, you could have easily kind of did a pseudo realist angle where you introduce some of these enemies from the Castlevania franchise onto this planet as sort of like an invasive species. Like, okay, the precursors wanted to try and deal with this with the Crown quarantine by introducing species from other planets, and it could be actual Castlevania enemies like Rahab or the Edemus, and try and, okay, let's see what happens if we put them in here. And can they beat the Crown outbreak? Nope, they can't. So where was I? I'm sorry, my mom actually kind of yelled at what's arguing, and I had to pause the video. So, an invasive species. I mean, that would have been a very cool idea to have the story kind of bring in all these invasive species. I thought that would be a cool idea. Instead, we got a derelict sea moss that was still really cool, but not as cool as I think would have been. So I can't recommend this story. It's just, there's just not enough going on with the characters, with the plot. I mean, it's just not enough. So what would I change if I was the author? First off, I would honestly, I just keep the beginning as is, with them going into, with them panicking, going into the pods and then crash land on the planet. I thought that's fine. And then have the story focus more on the group dynamic. Instead of focusing on Anna and then later Anna and Adrian, focus on all four characters, with each perspective kind of representing a different genre. With Sypha, like whenever you're seeing things from Sypha's point of view, it becomes drama. With Trevor, it becomes something of a suspenseful, becomes something of an adventure, reflecting his character. With Adrian, you can get more into the sci-fi / suspense things, and with Anna, you could go full on horror. So you can kind of easily mix and match these four different genres together to make this kind of story, and flip the idea on its head by the genre switching depending on what character you're following. For example, at the beginning, Anna and Sypha are on an island where the item that basically turns off the anti-air guns of the planet are located, but Trevor crash lands in the area where the protagonist of Subnautica crash lands. So I thought, okay, so maybe we're going to switch between Sypha and Anna having this more relaxing thing, and Trevor kind of going on this adventure trying to turn off the Aurora's radioactivity from making everything worse. I thought, okay, that's actually not a bad thing. That's actually not a bad idea. But it strictly sticks to Anna and Sypha, and it kind of actually has a missed opportunity to kind of see Trevor's thing, because you could have easily used it to explore Trevor's character, what separates him from there. Another thing would be, again, introduce the Castlevania aquatic monsters as an invasive species. You could easily have them just, the precursors are like, we don't know how to beat this thing. Where the Sea Emperor eggs are not hatching. What if we bring animals from other planets here? Isn't that like invasive species? Do you want this planet to die? No. Then bring him here. We'll try something. That would be cool. I mean, you had a massive missed opportunity to kind of do like a pseudo-parallel narrative on the dangers of invasive species on a large scale. Like, invasive species are in fact a real thing. They are a very dangerous thing for a economy. I live in Florida. A couple years ago, there was a very dangerous risk of the environment off the coast becoming completely damaged because a bunch of I don't know if it's through tides. I don't remember if it was through tides or it was some guys who decided to just bring a bunch of them to the coast. But a massive swarm of lionfish actually appeared off the coast, and fishermen were actually ordered to kill the lionfish because they were invasive species. They were actually destroying the environment wholesale. Like they were damaging the environment to such an extent that they had to be wiped. They had to be wiped out just to be able to save the environment. So I think the idea of invasive species actually has legs. I mean, and honestly, Castlevania is one of the few franchises I can think that you can actually pull this off. Like, if any other franchise that that has a bunch of water monsters that would make sense for this kind of narrative, I can't really think of any besides Castlevania. So it was a really cool idea that's just not explored. There's also the derelict sea moth. One of two things could happen. One, you could have them actually, before being able to leave, they have one final confrontation with the sea moth. They manage to they have the prawn. Like Trevor has the prawn suit. He's taking out the ghost leviathans because the prawn suit I think can take out ghost leviathans. I can't remember. And then they confront the sea moth and they destroy it. Or have Alteria, they come in to grab everything that they built, and then they bring up the sea moth, and the ghost of Scott, follows them up in space. That would be really cool. That there's so many directions you could have easily taken with the sea moth that kind of made it disappointing that it ended the way it ended, with no ending at all. That was really, really weak. But I really do think this story has promise. I just don't think the author at this time when the story was written had enough experience. I think maybe if the author gets more experience writing these types of stories, these really, really carefully blended stories with multiple genres, because I think that's the best route that should be taken. Each character represents a different genre, and whenever you go through one of these characters, the genre shifts. So everything from the perspective to the mindset to the writing style should change, just simply depending on which character the story is focusing on. I think that honestly would make the story phenomenal. I just honestly think the author needs more experience, and that's it. So that is Subvania by Lania Inverse. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.